Excellent.
You're good. Sorry. We reached out to Google. We'll see if we can get it fixed.
Nathan, thank you so much.
Sorry, I'd love to talk, but I'm hearing about our stuff, so. Yeah.
We really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Nathan.
Yeah, good to see you all.
Yeah. Come again.
We got it.
Okay, so he said you would gain knowledge you don't have. God has kept back some good things you deserve to know, and he selfishly kept it to himself. So just eat, and now you'll know the difference between good and evil. And then he told them that they wouldn't die and that they would be like God. So what he did was define what God is. God is somebody who sets the values of good and evil. But if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you become the one who does what?
Go.
Decides what's good and evil. You get to be the top dog. You get to be the one who designs and builds any system of thought you want, and you're in charge. So whatever you say goes. So that's kind of the backdrop for everything that God has done in the history of man. So I gave you a little set of notes, and by the way, Jan will send them out to you who may be listening. And so just for introduction here to this particular portion of the chapter, let's just look at this little set of notes I gave you. And the question is, what can we learn about reality from answers to two questions? Now, these two questions are huge, and yet we very seldom think about them. Why are there many nations and kingdoms? There are something around 200 constituted nations on planet Earth. Why? And yet, why is there only one nation that's in his crosshairs? Why does he have all these nations, and yet, in point of fact, he's made all these promises primarily to one nation? So if you look at the thing, you have this huge collection of nations, but there's only one that he's really focused on. There's only one that he chose. There's only one that he gave the law to directly. There's only one that he gave eternal promises to about the nation. Why does he have all these nations in this pool of human experience, but he's only really dealing primarily with one?
Well, my guess is that if you've got lots of nations, you can see the different outcomes for what they choose. And when you look at Israel, you see the outcome for what they choose. It's a teaching tool. Yes.
Okay, so it's teaching us something very important. It's an object lesson.
Taking it back further than that, because of the fall and man's sin, he allowed all these nations to break out,
Right.
and then is using it for his glory. You know, then he picked Israel to be the nation, the covenant nation, and we have to work our way back to him.
Okay, so this collection of many nations, but with one that's kind of highlighted.
Yeah.
Then what we see is this glorifies him. Okay, at first blush, we say, well, how does that glorify him? That's what we want to look at. Okay, so I think I may have shared this with you, but it really struck me when I experienced this, and I'm going to say it again because I think it's got a lot to say. 1967, I was in Peru on business, and I met with some businessmen. There were 10 of them, and we had dinner at a really nice place. And in the course of the dinner, one of the men said, "Bruce, are you interested in investing money?" And I said, "Well, it depends on the investment. Would you like to invest in some condominiums that we're building here in Lima?" And I thought, I don't want to invest in condominiums. And I said, "No, I don't think I'd be interested." "Well, how about this one?" He said, "We've just appropriated 10,000 hectares of land in the Amazon basin within the confines of Peru. Would you be interested in investing in that?" I said, "Whoa, what's that all about?" So just briefly, the Peruvian government had a Homestead Act, and they said, "We will give you 1,000 hectares of land, and it's yours if you farm at least 1/10 of it." So the 10 guys got 10,000 hectares of land, and they said, "Let's just take 1,000 hectares, let's put our money into that, let's see what we can do with it agriculturally." So they hired a high-level professional agronomist and farmer type guy. And he said, these are the crops you want to try. And he had all kinds of different grain crops. He said, "We'll import Cebu cattle from India because they're insect resistant and so on." And so I said, "I'm in." So I bought shares of stock in that company. Now, the interesting thing is I can't find any evidence that the company exists now. That was almost 55 or 60 years ago. But that doesn't make any difference. But here's the point. Why did the government say you got to farm at least 100 hectares out of your 1,000? And why was that an advantage to the person that received the homestead?
There were probably a lot of reasons, but one would be that they wanted it to grow, and if no one did anything with the land, it would stay just the way it was. So they wanted to establish a city or something, so it would be a community and begin to grow more and more.
And to the advantage of the person who took the homestead land, you didn't have to put crops on 1,000 hectares of land. You didn't even know if the corn crop you put in would grow. So it gave you the permission to start with something big and then just carve out a corner, check it out. So this is a trial. I wish I had time to tell you all the stories I know about that, but it was a clever idea. So God has,
So are they testing the land?
yeah, what kind of crops would
Will
grow?
grow. Okay.
They were getting 3 harvests of maize in a growing year. We get 1. I mean, it's unbelievable what they got. Nut crops. So maybe this is kind of behind God's thinking. I'm not saying it is, but did God start with 200 nations to give a major overview promise of I've chosen all you guys and here's what I'm going to do for you? Or did he just choose one little group? He just chose one group. It's one family. It's the family of Abraham. So he works with Abraham. He gives them the law. And he says, hey, if you live in accordance with these values, you'll prosper. And by the way, you'll please me, and I'll plow more and more of my resources into your life experience. If you choose not to obey me, if you neglect me, then you'll lose. So it could be that he's saying, well, I'll just start with something small. By the way, there's a lot of wisdom in this. If we're doing something new, I'll just start with something small, and I'm going to use it, as you said, to teach something as an object lesson. And what I'm going to teach is all this glorifies me, it blesses me, and it reverses this, because this is the problem.
The only
This is the
problem is that God didn't need a trial to see if it would work. He already knew. But what it might have done as far as teaching, an object lesson would be to all the other nations around that God was mighty, that God was who he said he was.
Right, let's glorify God that way.
So when it says teach, it's not teaching him. The object lesson doesn't teach him. He's the teacher. Who's it teaching? The nations. So everything that happens in human history is now 6,000 years old. Everything that happens in human history so far for 6,000 years is supposed to be teaching us. It's an object lesson. So here's the question, and our authors are addressing this. What is it teaching us? What should we learn from it? Okay, so I made up this little chart. It doesn't come from the book, but it's just kind of an introduction to these three eras of time that the authors deal with. So let's look at this. What can we learn about reality? That's the reality of humankind and our interrelationships with each other and with God. So the first question, why many nations or kingdoms? But why is there one nation or kingdom that kind of stands out? Okay, so let's look at man's kingdom. And I thought of two words, if and since. If leaves you with I wonder if it'll happen. The word since leaves us with, that's going to happen.
Bruce, are you talking about God's kingdom as the millennial kingdom?
Yes.
You're not talking about Israel, you're talking about the millennial kingdom.
Well, his eternal, universal kingdom that comes to a highlight in the millennial age.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very specifically pointed toward the end.
Mhm.
And the millennial kingdom's the big stage on which he's
Mhm.
glorifying himself.
Mhm.
Okay, so in man's kingdom thinking, everything's if. How many assurances are there if you invest your money in 1,000 hectares of land in the Amazon basin? What assurances do you have you're going to make any money with it?
None.
You don't have any. Now, you can go back and study agronomy, you can study geography, you can study weather patterns, you can study all the plant life in the Amazon and everything, and say, I think after we've made this study, if we put this amount of money in, we'll get this amount out. But is there any assurance you're going to get it? No. So if carries a huge question mark. So in man's kingdom thinking, if is everything. Now, in fairness, God has allowed man to prosper, right? Think of two guys here in Cincinnati about 150 years ago that said, why don't we take some fat, animal fat, and see if we can make some soap out of it? Now, P&G is a marvelous company. When you think about it, they're one of the 500, but they're way up on the list, and they've been successful generation after generation. So there was a lot of if. Mr. Proctor said it's a gamble,
Whoa.
but
Hardy hard.
if we buy this property, put this equipment in, hire this number of people with some really high-tech educated guys, we can do it. So God has given man the desire to create. We're made in his image. He creates, we can create. He builds. He said, I want you to fill the earth, subdue it. So Procter & Gamble said, well, let's take animal fat that doesn't seem to have much value, see if we can make something out of it. They did exactly what God said in the chapter 1 of Genesis. The dominion mandate, subdue the earth. But they didn't have any guarantees. So we praise the man who puts his money in a new idea, it fails. And then it fails again when he tries. And then he tries a third time and it fails. And Edison tries 1,000 times and finally makes a light bulb. We praise that man. But at every step in his development of the light bulb, what did he face? If. Now, that's different than the way God thinks and the way God operates. But let's go a step further. So man would say, if we can use our wisdom and do thus and such, then with a bit of luck, we hope it will come to pass. We will win. I saw Charles Schumer on TV, and he said, we will win. Well, that's okay. When we back the Bengals or the Reds or whatever, and we follow them as a fan, we will say, we're going to win. But how do we know we're going to win? Does Schumer know he's going to win? Do we know the Reds are going to win? We want them to, but it's a way for man to feel good about himself, right? You wouldn't want to invest $1 million in a business that we're going to lose. But because that goes against natural law, God's built a desire not only to create, but also to see productivity and results, good results from our efforts. That's part of who we are as humans. But humans are still in the F or the if camp. So this is a logic, if then, right? If you do this, then this is going to happen. Now that's part of the intellectual framework of humans. God built it into us. If you do this, then you'll get that. If you obey me, you'll be blessed. If you disobey me, you're going to be cursed. If then. We operate on that sequence of two words every moment of our life. If I smile, the guy may be nice to me. If I have a growl on my face, he's not going to even talk to me. I mean, if then is everywhere. Okay, so what was the purpose for man ifing to have a kingdom? Why does Henry VIII want to have a kingdom?
Greed.
Why did he want a kingdom? Let's talk about that just for a second. He did have a kingdom. It's one of the
He
greatest.
wanted the power.
Okay, he wanted the power. So why does he want power?
Because he's greedy.
Pardon?
Because he's greedy. He wants everything for
Okay.
himself.
Because we're made to want. We're needy. We're needy. I need somebody to love me. I want somebody to like me. I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to be living in a hovel.
Our little G God, we want to be worshipped.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're getting down to what it's really all about. So Henry VIII wants a kingdom. Does he want it just a middle class or lower class kingdom? He's got an island. Well, he's got 2 islands, in fact. Does he need more?
He wants more.
He wants more. But why does he want more?
To feel good about himself.
He wants to feel good. So inside man's heart, there's what?
An emptiness.
Emptiness, dissatisfaction. Now, man's not going to admit it. Man says, look, I wear the crown. I don't need anybody else. I can be satisfied. Just leave me alone so I can get what I want. No, we all do it. I mean, it's part of fallen humanity. So part of this thing of a Henry VIII complex is that we're into glory just like God is. Except whose glory are we trying to achieve?
Our own.
And why do we want that glory?
To try to fill the empty space.
We're
Right.
trying to put something in there that satisfies. Now, quite frankly, for fallen people, we have to do that. We have to find something that satisfies. I can't believe the stuff I'm reading about young people and the emptiness that so many of them face. It's created a lot by the culture, the secular culture that lies to them consistently. They feel empty. They feel lonely. They feel isolated, alienated, and they don't know what to do. But the problem is, they think they're wearing a crown. Well, if I'm wearing the crown and I'm empty, I need to take charge of this thing. I need to live like I got a crown. So dissatisfaction can be filled with drugs, alcohol, sex. It just goes on and on, right? If I'm God, if I wear the crown, I decide what's right and wrong. Don't tell me that alcohol's wrong. It makes me feel good. I couldn't make it through the day if I didn't have a drink. Here's what's wrong. Man's view of reality is totally distorted because of sin. He thinks he's a king. And he also believes, because he accepts the lie that came from Satan, that you can be God because there really is no God. Okay, so why does God have these nations? Because he's dealing with these issues. Now, here's the other side of it. Does God force anybody to do anything?
No.
Well, it's possible we can find some places where he did, but in general, his dealing with humankind is not coercive. He doesn't force anybody to be saved. You can't be saved without him, but he's not going to force anybody. He's not going to force anybody to go to hell. He may condemn people to hell, but he doesn't force them to go there. He is non-coercive. So if he's non-coercive, then how are people going to get to truth? If you've got all these people on planet Earth that don't know the truth, that think they're a God unto themselves, how are they going to know they think they're a God and they think there is no God if he doesn't coerce them? He's not going to force anybody to believe he's God. He'll sure work hard with people to prove that he's God. How's he going to do it?
Well, he's given us reason. So when we look at the choices ahead before us, we have to reason through those choices and observe how other people make those choices. I think it's really sad, your explanation of what's going on with the kids, because they've been told they're a king for so long. I mean, that's just been the biggest lie.
It's a lie.
Oh, it's horrible, and everything that they do, they're told that they're just great. And golly, when you come to the reality, or when you realize that that's not true, boy, are you in a bad place.
Well, many of the folks that have been given responsibility to help youth grow up, I'm thinking of schools and so on, the message there is you can be anybody you want to be. That is a huge lie.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, but wait a minute. That means I can, as a man, become a girl. No, seriously, this is
I
all
know.
part of it.
No.
You can be whatever you want to be. You want to be a king, go for it. So we have guys like Elon Musk. I appreciate what he's doing, but here's the point. Elon Musk is a super billionaire because he believed he could do it. In fact, here's the thing. God honors people who believe they can do it if they do it his way. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to do this thing right. I want it to succeed. Now, if I want to make money for self-aggrandizement and self-satisfaction, God says, I'll let you do it. I'm not going to coerce you. But what if somebody says, I want to be satisfied because in truth, I know, God, my emptiness is a problem because I believe you don't exist. I don't believe you're on the scene. I don't believe you care for me. We had 8 young men here Tuesday night. There are 12 in the group, and 4 couldn't come. But I had this questionnaire, there were 20 questions, and the first week we're dealing with the subject of who is God? And I had this 20 questionnaire. And I was delighted to see that most of their responses showed that they'd been well instructed, pretty well instructed in basic theology. But Jan noticed one of the low scores was, I'm assured of my salvation. What if we're not sure that God exists? What if we're not sure that God loves us? I can't live without him. But if I'm not sure he exists, I only have one choice. I got to put the crown on and make something out of my life. Now, not all desire to succeed in business or in investments, we're not saying those things are wrong under themselves, unless the way I think about reality excludes God. And that's exactly what we have going on. So God is dealing with people who think they're God and aren't. They have to cluster in nations. That's a natural law. Why do there have to be nations? It's built into our heart of why. Why did God do that? There have to be.
Kind of reminds me of when they tried to build the Tower of Babel, and he decided can't have that and scattered the languages,
So who's the author of nations?
the Lord.
In Acts 17, verse 26, who decides the boundary of the nations?
God.
Who decides who lives in the nations? Who decides the longevity of the nation? In other words, natural law, what's built into the heart of every human being is we're all different. We have different languages. We've have different backgrounds geographically and sociopolitically and so on. And we will cluster around common unities. But here's another thing that God puts into the heart of man. The simplest social construct is a man plus a wife plus some kids, right? God says when you have more than one person, you got a problem because you're fallen. And the problem is that there's going to be antagonism, there's going to be a giant desire to grab power. So he instructed humans that the husband should be the spiritual leader of the family. That's the model for government. A loving spiritual leader who's concerned about the subordinates, so to speak. So the concept of authority in a social group, this is God's idea. But what happens when fallen men gain power? If they don't believe that God exists and they think they are God. What happens?
Well, they can ignore the boundaries. They can, those boundaries don't really exist, or, we can.
Yeah, you can become Putin. You
Just
can
the
grab
land
the
grabbing.
Ukraine.
Mhm.
You can be Xi Jinping and start trying to get Taiwan. You can do what you want. Here's the whole thing. God is so wise. He said, I'm just going to start Well, first of all, I'm going to have all these nations because it's my idea. By the way, does God approve of the United Nations?
No, it's the Tower of Babel of our time.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Does God want the EU?
No.
Does God want Canada and Mexico and the United States to join together?
Mhm.
Does God want unification of nations?
Mhm.
Uh-uh. But in the end, that's what he's going to have. He's going to have one nation.
Mhm.
Okay, so before we come to the one nation, which is coming, we see that we have many nations, but his focus is on one nation. So what is he trying to instruct all these warring nations to believe?
Well, he wants them to know that he's blessed that one, and he's given them, actually, he's given them the responsibility of spreading his truth. You know, these people who believe there's no God. He also shows those nations that when he steps in and works on Israel's behalf, they succeed.
Absolutely.
So that's his baby. And even though they rebel against him, it's amazing to me when you read through the Old Testament, you see how many times they reject him, they rebel, and still,
Mhm.
if they show even a modicum of interest in him, he comes right back.
Absolutely. So really what we're looking at on this national thing, on these kingdoms, is he started with one nation. And then it got all messed up. But he's going to work with this messed up collection of God denying people and produce what? One nation. He's going to restore with patience what happens when the first nation fails. The first nation was a man and his wife, right? When it fails, everything goes haywire. It doesn't work. But God, in mercy, in justice, and with a real deep, loving desire to see a happy, cohesive family unit, says, I'm going to let this thing go on for a while, but I'm going to bring it back to one nation. So this is the question. Why does he let this thing go on for 6,000 years? What is that telling us?
We're slow learners.
We are slow learners. What does that say about God if he endures it for
Very
6,000?
Very
Patience.
patient.
How is this glorifying God?
Shows how patient he is.
Plus the fact we have guys like Zelensky and Putin, and well, we could name some guys in the United States, some bad news bears. How does it explain why those guys continue? Why doesn't he deal with them?
Good question.
No, seriously.
But he lets us see, he lets people learn from
From it.
these bad examples. If we have, if he has put his spirit in us, we can discern,
That's it.
we can discern that this is wrong, this is not right.
So we're living in an object lesson. We're living in a schoolroom. We're living in a set of natural experiences that are teaching us that God is one. He has allowed all this diversity, this nonsense diversity, but he's going to bring it back to one. But instead of wiping out the fallen races of man, he endures with patience and loving kindness all the nonsense the kingdom life has produced, the murder, the death, the destruction. He tolerates that. He says, you're free to choose. I will not coerce you, but I will teach you because I'm a loving father, and I will teach you. It's better to be one than many. My way is always right. God can say. So let's come back to this if and since thing. So man says, well, if we can use our wisdom and do thus and such, then with a bit of luck, we hope it will come to pass. And by the way, we're going to win. Now, no football team can go on the field and say, well, we're going out here, but we're going to lose. No farmer plants his seed and says, I know there's not going to be any harvest. Nobody does that. So what's the purpose? So for the man's kingdom concept, the purpose is to gain power, respect, advantage, acquired wealth. To do what? Why do we want it?
I love what you wrote here, Bruce. It is so on target. In order to hide our insignificance. It's so true. We don't want to acknowledge that.
What? Because we've acknowledged what?
They were kings.
We are significant. We're kings. That's what Satan told us, and we believe it. But we don't feel it. We don't have it. But now, those guys that have strong desire, set strong goals, they can achieve. And now they can feel better. Now they can find inner satisfaction without God. Oh, they got to have some help along the way with drugs, alcohol, and sex. We'll throw some porn in there and whatever else people want to throw in there. All of this is a lie. Everything about human existence, if it isn't grounded in the truth that God exists, everything is a lie. Now, why can't people see what's been happening in politics in the recent decades? It's patently clear what's been going on. A whole bunch of bad news guys that think they're kings have been using these high positions to grab as much significance as they can. Why did we not see that? I never thought that there was as much corruption in American politics as there is. I knew there was corruption. I'm corrupted. But I didn't realize how bad it was. Here's the whole point. God says, look, you guys cannot see. You cannot hear. Because you closed your eyes and you closed your ears and said, as a king, I don't need any outside information. I already know that God doesn't exist, and I'm kind of a God. And now we find ourselves in one gigantic human progressive mess. And it's destroying youth in America. Unbelievable. So what do? Well, let's look further. What's the motive then for man's kingdom?
Elevate the image of man.
Wait a minute. In order to improve the image of man, you have some kind of a standard about God. So if you're going to improve your image and remain the king, and you can't diminish this anymore, what do you got to do? Ramp this up. Everybody knows that God exists. That's what it says in Romans. In fact, God says, nobody has an excuse to stand before me at the great white throne and say, whoa, I didn't even know you existed. He said, no, I put it in your heart. From the moment of conception, you knew I existed. So we can't diminish that, in fact. So in order to be in a position of kingliness, what do we have to do? I can't diminish that, but I can what?
Glorify that.
I can elevate that, glorify it. And this is what we're dealing with in the world. So what is Why does God have all this stuff that's going to happen in the future? Why is there going to be a rapture? Why is there going to be a tribulation? Why a millennial kingdom? Why the great white throne? Why the judgment seat of Christ? Why the marriage supper of the Lamb? Why the burning up of heaven and earth? And then finally, oh my goodness, the new heavens and the new earth. If we don't think about it, we just say, well, he's doing it. God's saying, Bruce, I am doing it. But I'm doing it so you think about it. I want you to know there's a reason. And you win if you get it right. But you have to understand that you have accepted a lie, and now you're a liar. You've accepted deception, now you're a deceiver. That's who we really are. We're a bunch of lying deceivers trying to say, come on, kid, you can do anything you want to do. Man, are we in the bottom? But what do we think we're in? We think we're kings. What a wicked deception to be one thing and think we're another. But this is what we're dealing with. And so if you accept it, please, all of prophecy is undoing this problem. Everything that God has planned is the means by which he patiently teaches us to understand. He started with one happy family unit. Now it's a messed up family, but he's going to complete the ages of human history with one gigantic human family that loves each other. That's his purpose. But he understands if you're dealing with people who are deceived and liars, evil at the core, who do no good, are not righteous, don't understand, and so on, it's going to take time. 6,000 years so far. It's going to take a lot of patience. And it's going to take a lot of object lesson material. So what's one aspect of human kingdom history that should teach us all kinds of things? It happens with every nation, every kingdom. They're always at
War.
war. You know, we've aggrandized war. Think how many movies there are. We just watched Braveheart. I love that movie. It's all about war.
You watched it.
Oh, I did. I love that movie. It's all about war. Now, there's a lot of fiction in that movie, I'm sure, but there was history there too. People have said there's no time in history when there hasn't been war. And there's no hope that there won't be war. Everybody knows that. That's why they build up nuclear power, because they know there's going to be the possibility of war. But war is people against people. And God said, no, I'm going to produce a family where people love each other. They're happy. They have roles to fulfill, and they do, and they enjoy each other. And they're doing it because I exist and I am God. So the truth is, man is bankrupt. He ultimately loses his created humanity and faces eternal destruction. How is humanity being defaced, debased today? Let's look at our young people. What is happening that's creating that which it doesn't even look human? I talked to a mother. I invited the son to come to our Tuesday night meeting. She said, our little small group's praying he'll agree to come. But he's isolated himself. He just sits in his room. He has 2 degrees from community colleges in 2 different fields. He's a bright kid, and he's a nice kid. Jan and I have known him for years, He's isolated, but he's not the only one we know.
Mhm.
Why are they caught up with, I gotta feel good. I need to be on media. One of the greatest enemies of mental health was this word. If you're on Facebook, I remember years ago, Nathan said, well, my friend so-and-so has 1,200 friends. I said, what? I didn't understand what he was talking about. Yeah, he's got 1,200. I've only got X number. And I said, oh, I know what you're talking about. Are these friends?
No.
This is virtual. What's happening to youth? Everything is virtual. This is virtual. It isn't real. This doesn't bring any satisfaction. This is virtual. It's not even true. There's nobody that's a king like this. This is virtual. There is a God. He manifests himself all over the place. So really, we're in school. God wants to teach us. I started out with one happy family. I'm going to end up with one happy family. In the meantime, we got all these, what do we got? 8 billion people on planet Earth. We got all these unhappy people, unhappy nations. They're at war with each other. Everything's kind of in bad shape, and I'm not coercing anybody. But if you want to come to my classroom and you listen to me as a teacher, I'm going to usher you in, I should say, to a glorious life experience. So let's look at God's kingdom. Man operates on a basis of if-then, no certainty. But in God's kingdom, everything is since-then. So there's a verse in Colossians, if you then be risen with Christ. You recognize it, Colossians 3? If you then be risen with Christ, set your affections on things above. So if I start with, if you then be risen with Christ, does that sound like a statement of completion or certainty?
No.
If can be used in a questionable sort of way. But really the grammar actually, apparently, is saying since. So if and since are two words that get kind of complicated. The use of them. If I'm saved, I am resurrected with Christ. But what if I say, since you are resurrected with Christ? Think of the difference between if and since. So let's look at God's kingdom, since. God says, well, since I am that I am, then with sovereign providential certainty, it will come to pass. I am already the victor. Doesn't that sound a lot different than what man thinks? Purpose. God's purpose, demonstrate his inherent power, honor, certainty of outcomes, and possessed wealth that's inherent in him. So really, he's flexing his muscles. He's showing forth his glory. All of heaven shows forth his glory. All of nature, everywhere his glory shines. If you have eyes to see. Because once you see it, you take the crown off. Once you see it, you quit trying to bring those things that satisfy on your terms. And you yearn for that oneness. Think of the churches, how divided they are. Denominationalism. But think of any local church, how divided the local church is. Scrapping and fighting and arguing and dissatisfaction with this and that. We yearn for that oneness, the mind of Christ. You can't have it unless you know history. That's where it started. So now we're coming back to the 3 R's, which are what? Remember, repent, and repeat. Remember, we started out as one happy family. Repent because you're living in the context of unhappy situations, socially, politically, and so on. And after you repent, then repeat. So all of history, human history, is based on those 3 R's. So God is trying to teach you. He said, I'm the teacher. I'm giving you some object lessons here. Remember what it was like. I told you what it was like in the garden before sin came in. Now repent because you're a son of Adam. Turn away from divisiveness. Turn away from anger. Turn away from war. Turn away from self-satisfying evil things. Repent of it. And repeat. But he doesn't ask us to go back to Eden. So let me ask you an honest question. How many of you, as you look at life today on planet Earth, would like to go back and live in the garden before there was sin? You got to vote yes or no. So how many, you have to vote. How many would like to go back to Eden?
Do we have a choice of where else we would rather go than that?
No, you have to just decide.
Do we get to wear clothes in Eden? We
That's
have to be naked.
an important question.
No way.
Very good. I don't know the answer. I actually like that question. I don't want to go. No, seriously, let's vote. This is silly, but let's do it. How many of you, if you had your choice, would like to go back to Eden? Just to get out of the mess we're in planet Earth.
I would.
I think
You like
I
to?
would too.
How many would like to go forward into the eternal kingdom?
Oh, well, you.
Oh, you
said we
didn't get that
as
as
a
a
choice.
Well, I didn't
Yeah.
give you the choice first.
No, I like that.
Okay, what's the difference between Eden and prophetic teachings on what's coming? Eden was good, but we're moving toward better. But how is the millennial kingdom better than Eden?
Well, Eden was innocence,
Mhm,
Okay,
and the millennial kingdom is life in its fullest,
mhm.
with its good and its bad, with Christ.
yeah, what else?
You know, when they bit the apple and we get the knowledge, we have knowledge. We're more aware, and God he uses that knowledge. You know, let's reason together. Let's, I don't know.
We're in an entirely different status of
Mhm.
understanding.
Mhm.
Was Adam and Eve married to Christ?
What did you say?
Were Adam and Eve married to Christ?
No.
They were one with God.
But in the future, in the millennial kingdom, we're married as the wife, the bride of Christ. We're married to him as co-regents. We're ruling with him. In the garden, essentially Adam ruled because God said, hey, I'm giving you dominion over the garden. But in the future, we're going to rule with the king, and he's going to be visible. But how about this? Was there any evil in the garden?
It entered the garden.
It entered the garden. In the millennial kingdom, where's evil?
In the pit.
In the pit. But here's the distinction. There's still evil in the garden. Satan's in the pit. He can't do anything. But do people sin in the millennial kingdom?
Yes.
Well, how can they sin if Satan's not there to prompt it? It's in them.
Own sin nature.
Original sin.
The sin nature. Look at God's wisdom. He's teaching us. He's saying, look, you guys want to wear your t-shirts. Satan made me do it. And that's kind of fun. And we get a big chuckle. But that's not true. You're doing it. You're the cause of your problems. Because you thought you were God. You diminished me in your thinking. And you end up being my enemy. And not only that, you end up empty, alienated, lonely, feeling useless. and you're doing everything you can to find inner satisfaction, and none of it works. So we come back to this thing. This is so sweet. All prophecy is about what? All this stuff that's coming, everything that's happened before and is moving toward the end, what's it all about?
To teach us, to sanctify us.
Teach us what?
About God.
He's showing us what true love is. He's showing us what mercy is, what compassion is, what truth is. And he does it non-coercively. So this brings up a huge thing for us. He can do this because he declared right from the beginning, we're free. We have freedom of choice. This is our best friend, but it's our worst enemy. So here we are, how many in here? 6 people in this room that all profess Christ. What's our job as we look at this? We know Christ. We know the truth. What should we be doing?
Be an object lesson,
To live it by example?
right?
What else?
Mm.
To speak it, declare it,
Declare it.
tell others what we know.
Mhm.
Yeah. The churches should be teaching this. The people in the church should be teaching us. In every generation, God's people should have been teaching this. And some have. The Word does, doesn't it? The Spirit impresses this stuff on us as we study the Word. And we can be part of seeing a course correction as we move toward the end. But here's the thing, and the book is addressed forsaking Israel, to what happens if you get rid of that concept. Who is God dealing with as an object lesson to teach the Gentiles?
Israel.
Israel.
Mhm.
You know, if we think about it, why is Hamas allowed to do mean and despicable things to Israel? God could stop that. He doesn't coerce. Why does he let it go on? I don't know. But what might be part of it? How do people who are fallen, who think they're kings, end up acknowledging a true king? When what?
When they realize that they're not king.
When we understand we've been living by a lie every nanosecond of our life. The minute I realize, well, I'm not a king. I can't make life work. I'm trying to do everything I can to make it work. But the minute we acknowledge we're not a king, God says, I made you dependent. You were depending on yourself. I'm taking self away. What's the object solution? Him. So everything about war, everything about all the international intrigue and, you know, all the problems of it, all the local political stuff and everything else, it's all allowed to teach us what? You're not God.
And he is.
I am. This is what this chapter was about. I mean, I know he got into a lot of stuff, and the way he discusses is very theoretical and theological and so, but I think this is what he's saying. There's a purpose for all this that's coming to pass in prophecy. So the motive for God's kingdom is to humble man's self-made image. so they can see the glorious goodness of God. So let's look at the life of the Apostle Paul. Did he have a pretty expanded ego as a young man?
Yes.
What did he think about himself? It was true.
He was a Pharisee of the Pharisees.
He was the best of the Pharisees. What else was he?
Well, he believed he was God's agent in getting rid of, all those
Christians.
Christ
Yeah.
followers. So he became God's agent, but then he pretty much became God. Ripping people out of their houses and,
Yeah.
killing them.
He understood he was God's agent, but if you think you're God's agent, what can happen to your thinking? I'm God.
I'm acting for him.
I am acting for him. I'm mediatorial. I'm his man. So I often ask myself, why did God pick Paul? I think he was an apostle, and I think he was the greatest of the apostles. Why did he pick Paul, the persecutor of Christians, to be an apostle to the church? Why didn't he pick some nice guy?
He wanted to make a statement. If I can, convert this guy that's doing all this evil against me and my church, if I can convert him, it just brings so much more glory to him.
So why does he let Israel sin? 4,000 years of sinfulness. 4,000 years of denying the God that gave them the law, the land, all these promises. Why does he pick them? Why didn't he pick the Australians? They do a better job than the Israelites did.
Because in the end, it's going to bring you more glory.
That's right. And Israel is a perfect picture of promises being made by God, God's loving, tender care, fatherly concern for Israel, and so on, kingly concern and protector and provider, and God patiently endures in 4,000 years. What if man says, I'm not God. I don't have a crown. Not yet. I'm trying as hard as I can to be happy. I make myself smile when I go to work. I try to be pleasant. I avoid argumentation. I'm doing everything I can to be a nice guy. And I hate life. I'd do anything to get some inner satisfaction. He's still wearing the crown, isn't he? But here's the beauty. If we see that we don't have a crown yet, then we get it right about him and we get it right about ourselves. And then we accept the promise that later, as we return to what God's purpose is to have one happy family, we got a whole mess of families that are not happy, but we're moving toward one happy family. And in the end, we're married to Christ. In the end, we're ruling the whole world with him. And in the end, what do we get?
A crown.
Crown.
We're grabbing the crown before we deserve it. And you can't get the crown if you think you deserve it. The only way you get the crown is to acknowledge you don't deserve it, that you don't deserve it. God is he's so wise. I think he has a sense of humor. I think he's a loving father who sits there and says, it's so funny to see the kids act this way. But in 10 years, they'll be different. Isn't that right?
Well, he thinks so. We don't think like God at all. We could not imagine thinking like God.
No.
Our thought process are 180 degrees opposite.
Yeah.
That's true.
But think of the journey we're on. This is the journey, is to teach us. Okay, things are not right now, but they're going to get better. But you have to acknowledge you don't have the crown yet. You think you do. You think you're independent, autonomous, and you're a man and woman unto yourself. You think you can make life work without God? Well, you look at the culture, you got all kinds of friends. You got 1,200 friends. You got things to satisfy inner dysfunction and lack of peace and rest. You got all this stuff. You can get power. You can wear a crown. You can make money. You can have all kinds of great experiences. But you're nothing until you realize I made a promise to Israel. And I'm going to keep my promise. Because what I promised Israel, I promised to you. I've endured them 4,000 years of all their foolishness. I've endured you, Bruce, for 85 years and all your foolishness. But I have an end for you that comes when you acknowledge you're not who you say you think you are. It's when you acknowledge who I am. And so I want to end here with just one thought. Tuesday night, when the guys were here, there were two men sitting at that table right there. And I walked around. I had broken the big group into 4 little groups. And they had a question to discuss between themselves. So I sat here in a chair, and this one young man said, well, you're an old guy. He said, what have you learned? And I was really intrigued by the question, and I didn't answer it real quick. I just thought for a second. And I said, well, here's something I think I've learned that's really been good. I said, when I came to Christ 50-some years ago, part of the deal was confess your sins. So I confessed all my public sins. At least I thought I covered them. And I knew I was free, that God loved me, accepted me, and I was not part of his family. But I said about 3 years ago, at the age of 81 or 82 or whatever it was, I said I started at night thinking about stuff I'd done in the past. And it wasn't things I'd done that were deliberate. It wasn't like, well, you stole some money from that guy, or, you didn't show up from work and you lied when you were really just drunk, or something of that sort. It wasn't that kind of sin. It was sins of ignorance. I didn't even know I'd done it. And he started bringing up people that I'd hurt. I didn't do it deliberately. It was just stupid or unfeeling or insensitive. It was all about self. And I said, this has gone on. It doesn't happen every night, but it happens more regularly than I thought it would. But I said, every time that happens, he's given me grace to confess. I didn't realize I did that, but I can see you're right. And every time I have confessed that, it's only by the grace of God that can happen. I find I want to be closer to him. In other words, confession, which can only happen by the grace of God. I'm not taking any credit for it. Confession is the way in, and lack of confession is the way out. The more I acknowledge, and he's helping me to see all these failures, and they're not debilitating when he shares. It's not like, oh, it's thank you, Father. I didn't realize I'd done that. And thank you. You said that you shall be justified as the noonday sun. You're saved, Bruce, but you need to know that those things that happen in your life are not good. I did not approve of that. And I want you to be free of it as you acknowledge it. Here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to want to be closer to me than you ever been. And that's exactly what's happened. So the teacher is taking us what? What's he trying to teach us? Some stuff for the head? Yeah. What's he really trying to teach us?
Heart stuff.
Heart stuff, which is the hard stuff.
replace that empty hole with the cross of Christ, cruciform part.
Where's the empty hole? Ah,
They scribbled it full.
yeah, what's he trying to do? Ephesians 3:19. Be ye filled with the fullness of God. You and me and I and you. One thing of a desire of the Lord, that will I seek after, and dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord in his temple, more and more. Well, let's stop there. The only thing I would say is what he covered was interesting. Patient pedagogy. Pedagogy is methodology of teaching. He's the methodical, ultimate pedagogue. Does it make sense? That's what's being said. So all this stuff in history, present, past, and prophetic, is teaching us something. Then the terrible kindness. We say, whoa, tribulation period doesn't look fun. No, it's not fun. It has two purposes. Its purpose is to refine Israel. And in the process for Israel to become the witness that he intended for them to be, and they become the 144,000 witnesses, they're sharing the gospel with the Gentiles. He is extremely kind. He's taken them through hell and back, and those that trust in him will become enamored with him and very useful to him. And then the final nail, I didn't really grab that too well, but the millennial reign, what's all that about? Israel was birthed at Sinai, given the law, mediatorial leaders. Israel is rebirthed. Zechariah 3:9, I believe. Israel is saved, reborn in a day. So why should we be blessed to know that Israel's not tossed out? Reformed people say, we're done with Israel. We are the new Israel.
Well, if he's done with them, he's done with us.
If he's done with Israel, there's no hope.
He's promised for
We know
eternity.
his promises.
I don't know how they can toss Israel out or just say he's done with Israel.
Well, it's sad that they do it.
I know.
But yes, if he doesn't keep his promise to Israel, how do I know he's going to keep his promise to me?
Exactly.
If he doesn't keep his promise to Israel, how are we going to learn anything? God is willing to sacrifice his chosen people and deal with them in mercy and love and kindness to teach us Gentiles who are not even under the same promises so that we can be included. Israel got cut off as a branch from the original tree. Israel's going to be grafted back in. So what's the job for the church? Israel's out. You talk to any Jew. I have several acquaintances at the gym that are Jewish. I've had conversations, and it's like you're talking to darkness. They're lovely people.
Mhm.
Our job is to make them jealous. Romans chapter 11. How do you make somebody jealous? It's not by talking, it's by living. The Jew could look at the Gentile. Why is God blessing these guys? They are Gentile dogs, was a terminology that was used back in the time of Christ. Why is he being nice to the Gentile dogs and make the promises to us? But if we're loving, considerate, kind, willing to share our faith, hospitality, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, that's attractive. Why does God let the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons go on when they teach heresy? Why do those guys go out 2 by 2, men and women, knock on doors? Where's the church? It's not knocking on doors. Why has God allowed them to prosper, to make us jealous, envious? We're supposed to be doing that. they are working for the enemy. Why do we tolerate that? Why aren't we concerned? In other words, if we look at human history, from the garden through prophetic time, the millennial kingdom, what's God trying to do with everything? He's trying to teach us stuff. He's the greatest teacher ever lived. And he gives A+ in the end.
Bruce,
Right.
have you seen the commercials on, television, primarily Fox, in fact, probably only Fox, but the commercials for Hallow,
Yeah.
Hmm.
it's basically
Catholic.
Catholic. And, asking people, are you gonna, pray with us? Yes. The sister says yes, the priest says yes, and the, guy on the street says, yes, I'm coming to pray with you. And it's a
prayer app.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
prayer app that they
Oh.
advertise on television.
Interesting.
Promoting it.
Mhm.
We've got a glorious calling.
I'm thinking, why aren't we doing that,
Yes.
Hmm.
God is a lovely, sensitive, engaging teacher. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you're a good teacher. Thank you for human history. The fact that you recorded it for us from the garden right on through to the end. You recorded it so we'd learn. But what we're supposed to learn isn't just all the facts so that we can be good Bible teachers.